Hello and welcome back to the Radio Mechanic main bench. And longtime viewers will note very quickly that there's a lot of stuff missing. There used to be a very tall equipment stack there. My noise figure meter and several other pieces of gear were there. All of the laboratory bridges have gone, along with the Q meters and all kinds of stuff. Getting pretty sparse down here. I've been selling off and giving away, and you know, we all look the inevitable in the face. It's not that it's imminent, but I know it'll happen. If it's all here when I kick the bucket, it'll all end up in a roll-off dumpster. So we've been moving it on, hopefully to somebody that can make use of some of it. But we're not done by a long shot. And we've got something special for you today. Let me get it up. What we have here is a package from David in Ovid, Michigan. And this is supposed to be, or is, a 1947 Chevrolet car radio, which will, whoops, keep on there. Not that I care too much about people knowing where I live, but you never know. So we're going to slice this open and see what we've got inside here. I'm going to keep his return address. And we're going to be shipping this back to him when all is said and done. This radio is going to have a rather unique power supply for the young players. A lot of the old timers will know what I'm talking about. I haven't done one of these in a long time, and to be honest, I was a little hesitant about taking this one on because someone's been in it already, and I don't know what I'm going to find. I already know that the back is missing on the radio. Oh, nice packing job. And I just hope there aren't a lot of other missing pieces. There's the bag with the knobs and screws. I believe that was the power connector. Ooh, I don't want to grab it by the foam rubber there. But let's get this thing on the bench and see what we're dealing with. And there you have it, 1947 Chevrolet car radio. Back then, the radio and the speaker, everything was in one unit. I had a Buick car radio that I sold, oh, it's got to be 8 or 9 years ago now, that looked virtually identical to this from the outside. You got your 5x7 speaker, at least I think it's 5x7, most of them were. But, let's find out. It's, yeah, 7x5. That's what it is. Fairly common. Looks like all of the tubes are in there. That's the one of these is going to be the power connector, and I believe it's this one because it's got the choke and a capacitor on it, but the hardware has been pulled out, and this will be the antenna. And this will be the other half of the power connector. It would have had the fuse in it and went on the back like so. But they've got an RF choke and a capacitor on the DC power line. And this little jewel up here is a vibrator. And no, not that type of vibrator. These radios, oh, the dial cord's broken, I can see that. These radios use a B+, anywhere from 200 to, I don't know, 250, maybe even 275, depending on the set. and yet they were powered by 6 volts. And the way they did it was you had a vibrator, some people called them a chopper, and they were connected to the primary of the power transformer, and the points would vibrate back and forth, chop the voltage of the primary, and produce high voltage on the secondary. There's going to be a cold cathode rectifier in here, I would think, although this looks like a 5Y3. Usually these had a cold cathode rectifier. It's got a number on it, 6X5. So this is using an actual full wave rectifier. Most of these early sets had a cold cathode rectifier in them. Okay, let me see if I can find a matching schematic. Ooh, the tuner's all loose. This does not bode well. Not only was I worried about all the pieces that might be missing, these things can be a real bear to work on. They are permeability tuned. They have a series of slugs. These are your tuning coils, and there's a series of slugs that slide in and out. When you tune the radio, they don't use a tuning capacitor. It's all permeability. That part of it appears to be working smoothly. So let me get some paperwork out, see if I can find something that closely matches this, and we'll move on from there. Okay, we'll take a closer look at our power supply circuit. Even though this isn't the correct schematic, it'll be close enough to help you understand what we're looking at here. This is our vibrator, and it's merely an electromagnet with a set of points in it. When you turn the radio on, the current goes through this choke down through the center tap on the power transformer, and all of this is enclosed in a metal can. You kind of got to keep your fingers crossed that this 0.5 microfarad is still intact. I tried opening up one of these a few years ago. They're soldered closed and potted in tar. And I had one with an open secondary, and took one look inside of there and said not worth it, and sniffed around until I found another donor radio. It's a real chore getting these opened up, but at any rate, what happens is the current comes in through the primary, comes up here through the coil on the electromagnet and the vibrator into ground. That causes this reed to pull against this contact and ground this, so you have a high current pulse happen here. Of course, as soon as it closes here, it short circuits this coil, and it rebounds back and hits this side and grounds this half, so it gets a current pulse. And that just repeats back and forth, and you can hear them running. They just kind of bzzz when they're running, kind of like a bumblebee humming away, and produces a chop voltage, and alternately this side, this side, this side, this side. That induces a current or a voltage over here and goes into your rectifier tube and gets rectified. This is the common setup for most of them. It's critical that this buffer capacitor is in good shape. This is typically, anywhere from 1200 to 1500 volt capacitor. This one's marked 006. That buffer capacitor and this one here served to keep the points from burning up when it's running. And this also reduces hash, what's called hash. You get a lot of static, or they call it hash. It's a hissing sound from the vibrator that would end up going through the rest of the circuitry. This suppresses that RF hash and lowers it to a lower level. So if these capacitors are bad, the vibrators typically won't live very long. These are available in solid state, but they're not cheap. I'll look up what they cost and stick it up on the screen when I edit the video. But I seem to remember they're at least $60 for the solid state versions. You can get them in 12 volt and 6 volt. But anyway, that's where you manage to get your 200 to 250 volts DC supply to run the tubes. And why do you need that much voltage? Well, you're running a 6v6, and got to remember you're driving down the road in a 1947 automobile, and they weren't exactly quiet. So you need a little bit of amplification to be able to hear the radio. So running at 250 volts, they can probably get, 3 or 4 watts of audio out of that thing and overcome the road noise so you could actually hear the radio. And believe me, you didn't sit with your favorite girl on the side of the road somewhere listening to the radio in these cars, not for long, or you'd be walking home. They draw 3 to 5 amperes at 6 volts when they're running. They're pretty power hungry. Not like today's radios where you could probably play them for 2 days and still start the car. Oh, that's one type of vibrator. Another one that eliminates the rectifier. This is called a synchronous vibrator. It's got a second set of points, and as the voltage is handed off back and forth here, the second set of points is synchronized so that it's producing an output waveform that's chopped just like a rectifier would do, but it's doing it by switching back and forth between the windings as the primary is switching back and forth. So it chops the output into, or flips the polarity of the output into pulses that the filter capacitors can take care of. And I actually, if I back the camera up here, I went digging around on my junk pile and came up with a bunch of these. These are vibrators. This one is a synchronous vibrator. You can tell by all the extra pins on it. And we have some of the, these were typically 12 volt vibrators from the newer car radios, the 3-pin jobbies. I think these are 12 volt. Yeah, that's a 12, and that's a 12. And these 4-pin units also came in 6 and 12. There's a 12 volt 4-pin, and that's a 6 volt 4-pin. Now I have no idea what the condition of these are. These are pulls. As these get older, typically what happens is they fail to start, and you can give them a wrap. Give them a wrap, and they'll start vibrating and running. And they'll run as long as the radio's turned on. The next time you turn it off, go to turn it back on, the vibrator won't start. And what we used to do when we were driving around in these old cars was just give the dashboard an almighty kick, and you'd hear the vibrator take off and start humming, and you knew the radio was going to come up as soon as the tubes warmed up. But we'll keep our fingers crossed that either my 6 volt one or the one that's in there is in good condition. Because the solid state units are pretty pricey. And this radio, by the way, am I in frame here? I hope so. This radio has push-pull output on the amplifier, on the output amp. 2 6v6s driving the speaker. Of course, this is a Buick. This would have been a more expensive car, a little more expensive radio, where the Chevrolet, being the cheaper model or the cheaper General Motors vehicle, had the single-ended 6v6 output. So let's dig into this set a little bit and see what we're up against. Okay, as I stated, the guts of the fuse holder are missing. It would have had either a phenolic or some kind of an insulator, maybe hard rubber in there, and it would have had, like, the typical rivet looking piece that the fuse would bump up against, but that's all completely gone from this, as is the insulator. Oh, looks like the insulator's in the bag. There has to be an insulator between here and here because this is a capacitor. You got a choke here and a capacitor here. You have to filter the DC, otherwise the antenna is going to pick up all the vibrator hash. But It looks like it's in okay condition. I'm going to solder a piece of wire on here to stick out just for now until we get the fuse holder, so that I've got a way to power up the radio, and then I'm going to mount this back inside. I want to stabilize the tuner. I can see over here, was that all in frame? I hope that was in frame. Over here there's a trimmer capacitor for the antenna. That's not in the right position. That's supposed to be screwed into these two holes. I want to take care of some of this before I try to take the case apart, because I don't want the tuner flopping around and ripping wires apart. Let's hope nothing's torn apart as it is. But I'm going to put some screws in here. I'm going to stabilize this. I'm going to solder a wire on here and put the trimmer capacitor back where it belongs. And I'll bring you back when that's... Alrighty, our trimmer capacitor is back in its home. Our power connector is where it belongs with its insulator. Let me just take a look at that again. We'll take a look at that with an ohm meter, but I think that's correct. And our tuner is locked back on the chassis. I don't know why all that stuff was disconnected from the frame, but we have some leftover hardware. Now I know what those are. I know what that is, of course. This will go with that. I think there should be two of those, but we've got a bunch of leftover stuff here. I have no idea what that goes to. This fell out of the radio when I took it out of the box. There's some round head screws here, 3 of them. Not sure what they're for. No clue. Or the little spring. No idea where that guy goes. Or the little... Yeah, that's a little lock washer. Could have come from almost anywhere. I'm just going to throw this stuff back in the bag, because I have... Or that tiny little screw. That doesn't even look like it belongs to this radio. Who knows? The leftover piece from the fuse holder. I'll throw all this stuff back in the bag because we don't have any use for it at the moment. That'll keep it from getting lost. And let the camera repositioned here. Oh, I'm going to grab the closest meter. Make sure I don't have a short circuit to the frame. I want to make sure that insulator that is up in there is in the correct position. It looks fine, but I don't want to hook power up to it and find out it's dead short. So, ohms. Actually, we put it on. Yeah. Connect that to the... There's a good ground right there. And no short. Let's see what happens when I turn it on. Yep. So the power switch is working and we don't have a short to ground. So when the time comes to put power on this, I know that much of it's working. Whoop. Bang into the camera. Sorry guys. Didn't mean to send you around the block here. Now we have to pull this front off. All the screws are already out everywhere. Oh, I bet the round head screws were here. I don't know. Oh, and the next thing I notice is been fiddled with. See if we can get the camera to look down in here. There's supposed to be a little spade on the end of this wire that connects to the speaker down there. You don't want to try to pull the front of this off without disconnecting this, because typically these wires are too short to go anywhere. So, well, that's not good. I just saw as I went to unplug this, a wire poke up out of here. That's not good. So I'm just going to leave that connected, pushed into the speaker for now. pull the front of the radio off, because obviously somebody's broken that wire off. Now that typically comes right out of the output transformer. So let's hope the output transformer hasn't been ripped apart. That's right down here. Alright, let me pry the front off of this thing. Let me move the camera back. This is going to be a long journey. This is not going to be an event. Let's start working the front off. Because every one of the screws is missing for this. Alright, there's our speaker. And I think the mailman just pulled up. Yes, he did. And he's pulling up to my mailbox. Let's... Yeah. It looks like the lead has been pulled completely out of the output transformer. Are we still recording here, I hope? Yep. Turn this down here. This does not bode well. Yeah, somebody's been digging around in there. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Let me get some light on the subject here. I'm sure you can see down in there now, can you? Or can't you? Yeah. You can see the output transformer. I see one lead going over to the ground, and the one that's supposed to be connected to the speaker has been ripped right out of the output transformer. Ah, fudge. This is turning into oh well, let me see what I can come up with. Okay, after I found this broken wire and saw all the chewed up paper and wax on the output transformer, by that point I was pretty much convinced that the wire had been ripped, or the secondary wire had been ripped out of the transformer. And I was kind of, feeling a little despondent, but at this point I was also convinced that the schematic wasn't the correct one, because there's two connections on the primary, and I looked in here, and on the primary side, where all the primary wires come from, the B plus and the anode, there's a third wire coming out of there, and it just registered in my head as some kind of degenerate feedback. But I said, well, maybe that's the other side of the voice coil. Maybe it's not broken. So I grabbed my Fearless Fluke here, which has been with me for 30 plus years, and you saw me test the leads earlier. And if we look at the schematic, you can see that one side of the secondary is grounded and one side of the speaker is grounded. There's only one wire that goes up to the speaker, and that's the broken wire. This is the only lead that goes to the speaker, because the other side just goes to ground. So I took my probe and I stuck it on ground, and I checked all the leads that were coming up through the other side of the transformer, and I checked all three of them. There was no continuity. So I said, well, that theory goes out the window. And you saw me, I had just checked the leads earlier. And I fiddled around and fiddled around and fiddled around, and I said, well, what's this doing here on pin 1? I had convinced myself that it was going back to the screen, and I looked at the tube manual, and no, pin 1 has 0 connection on it as far as the tube's concerned. There's a pin present on the tube, but there's no internal connection. And I said, well, why the devil would there be another wire coming out and going to pin 1? And that's when I said, and there was nothing. Now this meter is only 30-something years old, and it's only been to Asia, you know, 75 or 100 times. They don't build stuff anymore to last. I was so disappointed to find out that it broke, that one of the leads had failed. Turned out the black lead had failed right here where it gets bent all the time. So I repaired that, and 5 minutes later the other lead let go in the same place. So they've been fixed, and I love these. These are those silicone rubber with the woven, multi-layer woven internal wire that just flexes and lasts forever. Well, 30 years I guess was the lifetime for bending right there. So they're repaired. So as it turns out, our output transformer is fine, David. Or Tom, rather. Not David, Tom. And, excuse me. They just brought one of the secondary windings out in the front, and the other secondary winding comes out in the rear along with the primary windings, which is kind of unusual. Usually you have all your primary windings on one side and your secondary wires exit on the other, but not in this case. They fooled me. So this lead, this black one in the back here that wraps around and comes up to pin number 1 is actually our speaker lead, and under magnification I could see the remains. There's the wire from the transformer, which is a solid enamel, and here are the remains of this stranded lead that was connected right here. So no output transformer needed. That's an item that's been taken care of, and we can move on past that. But there's more fun to come. Let's see what we find. I'm going to take a look under this shield here. The buffer capacitor should be under here. And I'm going to guess, or I'm going to say it's dead for sure at this point. They don't survive too long. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. You can see the end is blown right out of this thing. And remember I said it was going to be a fairly high voltage cap, 1600 volts. But that one's definitely a goner. Absolutely gone. Oh, somebody's been in here. With that in frame, yeah, you can see the nasty solder joints here. And this looks like a modern wire. This is different wire. Someone's been in here. There's a wire going from the rectifier to here. And there's a broken... I don't know if you can see this. We just keep finding more and more and more stuff here. This tube pin used to be grounded right here, and it's broken right off, ripped right off of there. Let's see, that's pin number 2. And that's, what did we say that was, a 6x5? Yeah, it's a 6x5. 6x5. Pin number 2. That's the heater. So there's no way this set was operational with the heater disconnected. Pin number 2 on the heater isn't even connected. No way that was functional. We can run a jumper wire up there. Now let's see, pin 1. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm on drugs. That's pin 1. This is pin 2 on the heater. What the heck? What the heck? Why is that going over to the vibrator unless they're just picking up voltage from there? They must just be picking up voltage from there. I'm on drugs, folks. That's pin 1. And I don't think pin 1's connected. 6x, 6x, come on. I've got to slow down. UVW 6x5. Here we go. Pin 1 is not connected. Not a problem. Okay, that one that's broken off is not a problem. It's not even used. Pin 2 and 7. This is pin 2. Coming over here to the vibrator, I'm going to guess they're picking up the 6 volts off the vibrator. And well, no, they wouldn't want to be doing that. That's one of the small pins on the vibrator. That's going to be connected to the power transformer. Yeah, that shouldn't be connected on the vibrator. What the heck's that doing over here? That does not belong there at all. Oh. These 2 small pins on the vibrator. That's the 2 small pins right here. And that's going to be, every time this thing switches back and forth, you're going to be interrupting the power to the filament, to the heater on the 6X5. The 6X5 is going to want to run directly off the 6 volts. And again, that's a modern piece of wire. I don't know what that's doing in here. So that looks like somebody's fudged that. Because if you run the heater off of there, it's going to be interrupted continuously. And let's see, 7 is the other one. Yuck. 7, yeah, somebody's modified. Oh, there's a critter in here. And he's alive. Hello. Look at that. Yeah. Come on. Stink bug. We'll put him out in the snow and see how he likes it outside. I'll be back. Somebody has definitely had their way with this set, because can you see that? I don't know if that's... Now you probably can. I'm sure. Bring some more light down here. This is the other heater connection. That certainly isn't factory. Makes me wonder what the heck is going on in here. So I'm going to have to fix those 2 wires. We're going to have to see if I've got one of these or if I've got to order one. I haven't done one of these sets in so long. 006 at 1600 volts. Let me look in my stash. Finding 006 at 1600 volts is not easy. I found these new old stocks, which probably would be okay, about $9 with shipping. I've got 005 at 6000 volt. These are new old stock, and they're probably fine. But the value is fairly critical for a buffer cap. Now I've got a 006 here, but this, I know this is only about 1000 volt rating, and it's got to be around 1600 volts. There's a lot of back EMF on that thing when it's running. And if you've got the wrong value cap, the points are going to burn up fairly quickly. But we'll take a look at this. I'm fairly sure that that cap is just fine. But let's see what it tests like. Now I can only test it up to 600 volts. That's all my tester over here will give me. Give you a better view of that. Right up there, we've got the Sencor tester. And 005 is what this is marked. Let's see what it reads. Value. Well, it's reading 643 nanofarads, so that's actually good. It's 006. Okay, I was sitting down and editing this in sections, and it was while I was sitting at the computer that light dawned over Marblehead what was going on in here. why the devil was there a ground wire here and a lead coming off the vibrator? Why would anybody change the heater wiring? Well, they wouldn't normally. What occurred is somebody evidently had a bad OZ4, and rather than buy an OZ4, they had a 6X5 handy. And that would work. You know, there actually were some sets with 6X5 rectifiers in them. Most of them were the cold cathode ones because it's another 600 something milliamperes of heater current that you don't need to be drawing. You know, it's almost an amp. So why have that heater going? But what happened is somebody put a 6X5 in here, and then they grounded pin 7, and pin 2, they ran the power up and took it off of here, which is a big mistake. That wouldn't have worked. However, I also found a couple of stub wires over here on pins 2 and 7, so maybe in the beginning they tried running some wires in from there to here, but found that there was just too much vibrator hash because the rectifier in here is normally all shielded, and then they're running these exposed wires all the way out over here to the audio tube. They probably had a lot of noise. So then they probably figured that they would run the power internally, but you can't do that from here. What they should have done is, and what most of the tubes in here have got, is simply ground pin 2 right here to the chassis, because that's your ground, that's your 6-volt return anyway, and then run pin 7 right to this point here. And that way you've got this capacitor and this choke isolating the rest of the radio from the vibrator hash. But I looked at this, and this solder joint has not been touched since this thing left the factory. Nor has this one. I'm scraping off the flux here, but this has not been touched since it left the factory, other than somebody added this in. But the rest of this, there's never been a wire on there. The right thing to do, or the right thing they should have done, is ground this one here and run pin 7 right to this point and pick up on the and that way it'd filter out most of the hash. We'll try that. We'll try that on this set and see how it works out. And if there's too much hash, we got two choices. We can buy an OZ4, and I checked online, they're available for with shipping around 10 bucks. So we could replace it with an OZ4, or they have a solid state version of the OZ4 to replace it, which is about the same money as an OZ4. Or I can just put some silicon rectifier diodes in here and put like 2 in series, because the back EMF coming off that transformer is pretty heavy. It's a lot of high voltage spikes. So if I put 2 1 kV diodes in series for 2000 volts and bridge them with a couple of, I don't know, 500K resistors or something to spread the voltage evenly across the two of them, I could just replace this tube with 4 1 amp 1000 PIV diodes, and you wouldn't have to worry about the heater current, and you know, they'll last the life of the radio. We'll see how it sounds. I'll try running the tube that's in here, because the characteristics aren't all that different from the cold cathode rectifier. So we'll try it, but if there's too much hash leaking out from that heater lead, then we'll go ahead. Actually, I could try running a choke on it as well. We'll try it. We'll run it out to this point where it's got some filtering and see how it plays, and we'll take it from there. Oh, and I forgot to mention, I'll find out when I re-edit this, none of these other solder joints have been disturbed. And the reason being, the cathode and the 2 anodes on the OZ4 are on the same pin numbers as they are on the 6X5. So there was no need to rewire any of the high voltage wiring. That's why none of this has been disturbed and it looked original, is because it is original. The pinout of the two tubes is identical, except the 6X5 has heater on 2 and 7, and the OZ4 doesn't have any heater because it's a cold cathode tube. So that's why I went so deep down the rabbit hole, because I kept looking at all the other connections and nothing else had been disturbed. The only thing that had been moved were the heater lines, and I couldn't figure out why they'd done that. Well, they did that because originally this radio had an OZ4 in it. Well, that's it for tonight. I'm going to call this the end of part A, probably well over 30 minutes at this point, and pick this up tomorrow or whenever I find some time to continue on. I did restring the dial cord and got that working. So that's one more item taken care of. I had to, there was a capacitor on the back side of here I had to get to, so I just slid this forward and did the dial string while I was at it. And that's working well now. But that's it for this evening. I'm going to, I'm tired and I'm losing focus, so I'm going to work on this on part B. We'll pick it up from there. See you soon.